let's talk about the three types of workers. There might be more. Elena talked to me about this a little bit yesterday in preparing for the town hall, and the contextual things they need to be aware of. So H-2A, undocumented, and documented workers in this time of COVID, what do they need to be aware of? And we'll start with Nicholas.
Well, speaking generally, it's always a good idea for all workers to record their hours independent of the employer. This ensures that they have a record of the hours that they work. And this applies to workers who are here on a visa, who are documented, who are undocumented. But it's always good to record your hours so that you have your own proof of your wages. All workers should check to make sure that the amount of money they were promised, that they're earning at least the minimum wage, whether they're paid by the piece or by the hour. So in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, this is the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. It is more in New York and depends on where you work in New York for what the minimum wage is. And I can leave that to Elena to describe in greater detail. If you're an H-2A worker, you're entitled to what is called the average effect wage rate. This amount in New York and New England was $14.29 an hour in 2020, but it's going to increase in the coming year.
Okay, Mike?
Well, the question, one of the questions obviously that's most important in the coming year or so is what Elena was talking about earlier, which is vaccines. And I think that it's very important for workers to learn as much as they can about the vaccine. There is a considerable amount of misinformation circulating in the community about the vaccine, and it's what are said to be its dangers. And I would urge all workers and all people who work with workers to make sure that correct and accurate information is the basis of any decision that a person makes to have or not have the vaccine. Don't listen to your next door neighbor. Listen to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Okay, Elena?
Yeah, I guess just, to add on to what Nicholas was saying, I think that unfortunately it's a little bit complicated depending on who you are, whether you're an H-2A worker, whether you're permanent resident or U.S. worker, whether you're undocumented, about which laws you're covered by. So if you're an H-2A worker, you might be covered by H-2A worker or another worker at the farm, at the same farm where H-2A workers are, you might be covered by the H-2A regulations, and you might be covered by the protections in that contract and in those regulations, but you might not necessarily be protected by Agricultural Worker Protection Act. If you're undocumented, you might be protected by that act, but you might not be protected by, as someone pointed out earlier, a fear of well, you might not be protected in the sense that you face these dangers in that you're undocumented and you don't have papers and you're not working in an H-2A farm either. So it's important that it's too complicated to explain everything here, but it's important that you're aware of who you are and which laws are protecting you, and that's something that Pine Tree can answer for you. If you live in the New England states, it's something that we can answer for you if you call and you're working in New York. So we can sort of explain which laws apply to you and what you're protected by, so that you have an understanding of where you stand and what rights you have, the right to have and the right to stand up for yourself for. Per Nicholas's comments about the minimum wage in New York, it's sort of been steadily going up over the past few years. The aim is to get to $15 eventually in the next year or two everywhere. So if you are in a farm on Long Island or Westchester, right now it just went up to $14 an hour. Anywhere else in New York State, except for the city, it's going to be $12.50. But as Nicholas said, if you're on an H-2A farm, or you're an H-2A worker, or you're a worker that's working at this H-2A farm in a similar job, you're going to be entitled to whatever prevailing wage piece rate there is, or the adverse effect wage rate, which, as you said, was $14.29, and it's probably going to go up in the next few weeks for this year.